The woman too old for love. The wind swept dry dust across the main street of Cinder Valley, carrying with it the same whispers that had haunted Evelyn Hart for years. She'd grown used to them. The sidelong glances, the pity, the faint laughter curling behind her back. She's too old to start over, they said. Too old for love. Too old for anything but chores. Evelyn kept her eyes on the horizon, the vast plain burning gold beneath the afternoon sun. Her truck rattled along the dirt road, its windows down, her thoughts louder than the wind. Ahead, the Ward Ranch waited. Her new place of employment, a job she'd accepted not for money, but for silence. The kind of silence where no one asked about her past, her ex-husband, or the younger woman who'd replaced her. The ranch appeared at last. Weathered fences, a half-collapsed barn, a house that looked strong enough to endure both storm and grief. Evelyn parked, stepped out, and was greeted not by words, but by the steady gaze of Caleb Ward. He was younger than she expected, late 30s, broad-shouldered, quiet-eyed. There was a fatigue about him, not of the body, but of the soul. He nodded once. "You're Ms. Hart." "Evelyn will do," she said. Her voice, low and calm, betrayed none of the uncertainty stirring within. He gestured toward the porch. "Appreciate you coming all the way out here. It's been rough keeping things in order since." His words faltered. He didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need him to. She'd heard the story. Everyone had. Caleb Ward, the rancher who'd lost his wife 3 years ago in a riding accident. 2 children left behind. A man who'd since spoken to no one unless absolutely necessary. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The kitchen sink was full, curtains yellowed with time, but the bones of the home were good. Evelyn rolled up her sleeves. "I'll start with what needs doing most." Caleb nodded again, relieved to avoid conversation. "The kids are out back. Mara and Toby. They'll need supper soon." He left her there, his boots heavy on the wooden floorboards. Evelyn watched him go, the stiffness of a man holding himself together out of duty alone. She recognized that kind of silence. She had lived it. By dusk, the kitchen gleamed. The smell of stew filled the air. Small footsteps approached, hesitant. Evelyn turned to find a girl of 10, Mara, standing in the doorway, her expression guarded, eyes as sharp as her father's. Behind her peeked a boy, no older than 7. Toby, his face open, curious. "Your father said I could make dinner," Evelyn said gently. "You can join me if you like." The children exchanged a look. Mara stepped forward first. "Papa doesn't eat with us anymore," she said, her tone too matter-of-fact for a child. Evelyn's heart tightened. "Well," she said softly, "then we'll eat for him tonight." They sat together at the worn kitchen table. The children ate cautiously at first, then with growing comfort. Toby giggled at something she said, something small and silly about the stew, and even Mara's mouth twitched toward a smile. Later, as the house grew quiet, Evelyn washed the dishes alone. Outside, she heard the crunch of Caleb's boots. He paused at the porch window, watching through the glass. In the lamplight, Evelyn's shadow moved across the walls, steady, unhurried. For the first time in months, the sound of laughter drifted faintly from inside the house. The next morning, the town noticed. At the general store, Diane's sharp voice carried above the others. "Did you hear? The new woman's living up at Caleb Ward's place." Imagine that. A woman old enough to be his mother. Laughter rippled. Someone else added, "Maybe she thinks she can fill the late Mrs. Ward's shoes." Evelyn heard every word as she passed through the aisles. She didn't respond, didn't even flinch. She paid for her supplies and left, the whispers chasing her into the sunlight. She'd learned long ago that silence was stronger than argument, and that dignity, once surrendered, could never be reclaimed. Back at the ranch, the day unfolded quietly. Caleb worked the fields, the children played near the corral, and Evelyn mended a tear in Mara's dress. When the girl asked why she always hummed while sewing, Evelyn only smiled. "It keeps the fabric from feeling lonely," she said. That evening, Caleb appeared in the doorway again, unsure whether to speak or simply listen. The children were already drifting to sleep near the hearth. Evelyn sat beside them, one hand absently resting on Toby's shoulder as she hummed a lullaby, something half-remembered from her own childhood. Caleb's chest tightened. It was the first time that song had been heard in this house since Lena died. He didn't step inside. He couldn't. But he stayed until the fire went out, the weight in his heart shifting. Not lighter, not heavier, just different. When Evelyn finally rose and turned, the porch was empty. Only the echo of bootsteps remained. She looked toward the dark fields and whispered into the stillness, "You're not the only one learning how to live again." The wind carried her words away, unseen, unheard, but somewhere in that lonely silence, something in the ranch began to breathe again. The quiet betrayal. Rain fell softly over the Ward Ranch, turning the earth to the scent of life and memory. Evelyn stood by the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Outside, Caleb moved through the mist like a figure half-remembered, steady, unhurried, a man who carried silence like armor. He entered the kitchen without knocking, rainwater clinging to his shoulders. "Storm's settling in," he said quietly. "Fence won't hold through another night like this." Evelyn nodded. "Then we'll fix it together when the weather clears." He hesitated, then poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. The air between them was filled with unspoken things. Not desire, not yet, but the faint hum of companionship born for shared solitude. For a long moment, neither spoke. The ticking of the old clock marked each second like a heartbeat. Caleb finally broke the silence. "You've done more around here in a month than I've managed in a year." Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's easier to care for something that isn't broken inside." The words hung between them. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Later that morning, Evelyn found Mara struggling to mend a torn blanket in her room. "Needle keeps slipping," the girl muttered, frustration trembling in her small hands. Evelyn knelt beside her, patient. "Let the fabric tell you what it needs," she murmured, guiding Mara's fingers. "You can't force it. You have to listen." The girl's movements slowed, steadied. When she managed a clean stitch, Evelyn smiled. "Perfect." Caleb watched from the hallway, unseen. For a heartbeat, it was as though time had turned back, laughter in the rooms again, warmth threading through the cold. Yet guilt pressed against his chest. He could still see Lena's face, the memory of her laughter tangled with the sound of Evelyn's voice. That night, while the children slept, he stood on the porch staring into the rain. Evelyn joined him, shawl draped around her shoulders. "You shouldn't be out here in the cold," she said softly. "Sometimes the quiet's easier than the noise inside," he replied. She didn't argue. They stood side by side, watching lightning flicker across the horizon. He glanced at her, studying the lines around her eyes, not from age, but from years of holding herself together. "You remind me of her sometimes," he said, barely above a whisper. Evelyn's breath caught. "Your wife." He nodded. "Not in how you look, in what you carry. That calm, that patience." She looked away. "Patience isn't strength, Caleb. It's what people call you when you're too tired to fight anymore." His mouth twitched, a sad smile. "Maybe that's what I need then. Someone who understands tired." She didn't answer. The words were too close, too dangerous. Yet in that silence, something shifted again, an invisible thread tightening, fragile but undeniable. Days passed. The storm cleared. Evelyn resumed her quiet rhythm, tending the garden, helping with homework, mending the little pieces of a home that grief had fractured. But others had begun to notice. At the general store, whispers returned sharper than before. Diane, with her bright lipstick and sharper tongue, spoke loudly to anyone who would listen. "He's got her living up there like she's mistress of the house." Imagine that, a woman her age playing wife. By evening, Caleb had heard. He found Evelyn feeding the horses, her sleeves rolled, her movements unhurried. "They're talking again," he said. "They always will," she replied simply. He frowned. "It doesn't bother you?" Evelyn met his eyes. "It used to. Now I just wonder why people waste so much of their breath on things that aren't theirs to understand." Something in her steadiness stirred him. He stepped closer without meaning to, drawn by the quiet gravity she carried. For a moment, it felt natural, inevitable, until he caught sight of the children running toward them and stepped back, guilt washing over him. That night, Toby woke from a bad dream and wandered into Evelyn's room, crying. She held him gently until he fell asleep again, his head resting against her shoulder. When Caleb came to the doorway, he froze. The sight, his son sleeping in another's arms, pierced something deep within him. It should have hurt, but it didn't. It felt right. It felt like home. He whispered, "Thank you," and turned away before she could see the turmoil in his face. The next morning, Toby called her Mama by accident. The word slipped out, soft as breath. The room went still. Evelyn's hands trembled. Mara looked from her brother to her father, uncertain. Caleb didn't speak, didn't correct the child. Later, when Evelyn stood alone by the window, she whispered to herself, "This isn't mine to have." But her reflection, weary, kind, resolute, didn't believe her. Outside, Caleb watched the children chasing each other in the yard, laughter spilling through the air. Evelyn stood in the doorway, sunlight crowning her hair like forgiveness. And though neither of them said a word, both knew something had changed, something beautiful and terribly wrong. The fire of judgment. Sunday morning dawned beneath a pale sky, the kind of light that carried no warmth. Evelyn stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing dishes while Mara and Toby dressed for the town gathering. Caleb had insisted they attend the church service and community lunch. "It'll be good for the kids," he'd said, though his tone betrayed doubt. Evelyn wasn't sure she wanted to face the crowd, but for the children's sake, she agreed. She chose a simple gray dress, pressed smooth but modest, and tied her hair back. Mara twirled before the mirror, proud of the ribbon Evelyn had sewn into her braid. "You'll sit with us, won't you?" the girl asked. "If your father wishes it," Evelyn replied softly. Caleb, waiting by the truck, nodded once when she appeared. "You don't have to come," he said, voice low. "I know," she answered, "but I think it's time." The church bell rang as they arrived. Conversations halted briefly, a ripple through the crowd, then resumed in hushed tones. Evelyn felt the weight of every glance. Some were curious, some cold, and a few pitying. She had lived through worse. Yet this sting was sharper because of what it threatened to undo. The fragile peace she'd helped build in that lonely ranch house. Inside, the sermon blurred. Evelyn focused on the children. On the way, Mara leaned into her side, and Toby whispered questions about the stained glass saints. When the service ended, they joined the townsfolk outside for lunch under the cottonwood trees. It began with laughter, forced, cautious, until Diane appeared, bright as poison. Her smile was honeyed, her tone sharp enough to slice through civility. "Well, if it isn't the lady of the Ward Ranch," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't think we'd see you here, Evelyn." Evelyn set down the plate she was holding. "I'm just here with the children," she said evenly. "Of course," Diane continued, her words dripping with false sweetness. "You've certainly made yourself part of the family. Folks can't stop talking about it." A few quiet laughs rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's throat tightened. Caleb stepped forward, jaw clenched. "That's enough, Diane." "Oh, don't take offense," Diane replied, feigning innocence. "People just notice when a woman your age starts." "Starts what?" Caleb's voice cut through the chatter, steady and sharp. "Caring for two children who needed kindness? Bringing life back into a house that's been silent for 3 years." The murmurs died. Diane flushed, caught between embarrassment and pride. "You don't have to defend her. Everyone knows what's going on up there." The children stared, confused. Mara clutched Evelyn's hand. Toby pressed his face in her side. Evelyn wanted to vanish, not for her own sake, but for theirs. The world had turned small and cruel again, and the air seemed too thin to breathe. Caleb's next words came like thunder. "If the price of peace is your gossip, then let me pay a here and now." His voice trembled with quiet fury. "I won't hear another word against her." The silence that followed was heavier than any sermon. People turned away, ashamed or afraid to meet his eyes. Diane forced a brittle smile and muttered something about misunderstandings before retreating toward her car. Evelyn's hand shook. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered once they were alone by the truck. He turned to her, still burning with anger. "I won't let them tear you apart. They'll only talk more now," she said. "And you can't fight them all. He reached for her arm, then stopped himself. "I'm not fighting for them," he said. "I'm fighting for what's true." Her breath caught, not from his words, but from the way he said them, as though truth were something fragile and worth protecting. Yet she knew what this meant. Truth wasn't enough to silence a town hungry for scandal. That evening, the ride home was wordless. Mara leaned against Evelyn, half asleep, and Toby clutched her shawl. Caleb drove with both hands tied on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. The sky outside turned violet, and thunder rolled far in the distance, a storm building somewhere unseen. When they reached the ranch, Evelyn stepped out before the engine stopped. "You should get them to bed," she said quietly. Caleb followed her to the porch. "Evelyn." She turned, tears bright but unshed. "Don't, Caleb. You know how this ends. I can't stay where I've become the reason people hate you." He took a step closer. "You think I care what they say?" "I think you're a good man," she said softly. "And good men always care, even when they shouldn't." He tried to speak, but she shook her head. "I love this place. I love them." Her voice faltered. "But I can't ruin what's left of your name." The screen door creaked behind them. Mara stood there, sleepy-eyed. "Where are you going, Miss Evie?" Evelyn's heart twisted. "Just for a little while, sweetheart." Caleb's voice broke the stillness. "Evelyn, please." But she was already walking away, the sound of her steps vanishing into the wide, empty dark. Inside, the children cried themselves to sleep. Caleb stood by the window long after, staring at the road where her taillights had disappeared. The ranch felt hollow again, too big, too quiet, too cold. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the first drops of rain. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rolled closer, promising a reckoning still to come. The children's choice. The days that followed were quieter than grief itself. The Ward Ranch, once alive with the sound of children's laughter, now felt hollow, each room echoing with what had been lost. Evelyn's absence hung in the air like dust after a storm, and Caleb moved through it like a ghost in his own home. Mara refused to speak much. Toby cried in his sleep. Caleb tried to fill the silence with chores, mending fences, feeding livestock, repairing things that had never truly been broken. Yet no matter how early he rose or how late he worked, the emptiness always waited for him when he returned. Evelyn, meanwhile, found refuge miles away at the orchard where she'd once worked before taking the ranch job. The small cottage there was simple, a bed, a stove, and just enough quiet to make her loneliness visible. She told herself she had done the right thing. Leaving meant peace for Caleb, safety for the children, and an end to the cruel gossip that shadowed them. But every evening, when the sun dropped behind the hills, she caught herself setting 3 extra plates on the table before realizing no one was coming. Weeks passed. Then, one morning, the sound of knocking shattered her solitude. When she opened the door, she froze. Mara stood there, her cheeks red from the cold, hand clutching Toby's tightly. Both children were dusty, exhausted, their clothes wrinkled from a long walk. Evelyn's breath caught. What are you doing here?" Mara lifted her chin, voice trembling but fierce. "We came to find you." Toby blinked up at her, eyes glistening. "We don't want another mama," he said simply. "We just want you." Evelyn dropped to her knees, pulling them both close. Her heart thudded painfully, love, guilt, relief all at once. "You shouldn't have done this," she whispered. "Your father must be worried sick." But before she could say more, the sound of hooves thundered up the path. Caleb dismounted before the horse even stopped, his face drawn with fear and exhaustion. When he saw them all together on the porch, his shoulders sagged with relief. "Mara, Toby," his voice was rough. "You could have been hurt." "They were safe," Evelyn said quietly, standing to face him. "But they shouldn't have had to come here." Caleb looked at her, really looked for the first time since she'd left. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, the hollow marks of sleepless nights. "They ran away because they couldn't stand the quiet anymore," he said. "Neither could I." Evelyn shook her head. "Caleb, please." No, his tone softened. "I let fear make me small. I thought if I cared for you, I'd be betraying Lena's memory. But maybe the only betrayal was letting the children live in a house without laughter." The children stood between them, silent witnesses to the truth neither adult had dared to speak before. Evelyn's voice faltered. "They'll talk again. You know they will." "Let them," Caleb said. "They don't live here. They don't tuck these children in at night. They don't know what this place feels like when it's alive." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want to be a scandal, Caleb. I just wanted to give them peace." "And you did," he said. "You gave it to all of us." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Mara, impatient with grown-up silence, took Evelyn's hand and pressed it into Caleb's. "Now nobody's sad," she said firmly. Toby nodded in agreement. "Can we go home now?" The word home broke whatever resistance was left. Evelyn laughed through her tears, shaking her head. "You two make it sound so easy." Caleb smiled, the first real smile she'd seen in him since they met. "Maybe it is," he said. They rode back together that afternoon, the children squeezed between them on the wagon bench. The sky above the valley was streaked with late sunlight, and the ranch came into view like something reborn. Fences mended, fields breathing again. It was still the same place, but it no longer felt empty. When they arrived, Evelyn stepped down first. The smell of the earth after rain filled the air. Caleb joined her, his hand brushing hers, not by accident, but by quiet choice. Mara ran toward the porch, shouting, "See, Toby. She's really home." Evelyn looked at Caleb, unsure. "Home?" she asked softly. He met her gaze, eyes steady. "Only if you want it to be." She hesitated, glancing toward the horizon where the last light of day flickered gold across the fields. "I never stopped wanting it," she said at last. The moment was small, almost fragile, yet it carried the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they were ready to rebuild. As the family stepped inside together, laughter rose once more, hesitant at first, then whole. The gossip would return, as gossip always did, but it would find no home here. The children's voices filled the rooms, chasing away the long silence that had ruled too long. And later that night, as Evelyn tucked Mara and Toby into bed, she heard Caleb's footsteps outside their door. Slow, steady, sure. He paused there, and she knew without turning that the house finally felt like it belonged to all of them. Outside, the wind swept gently through the open fields. The world at last was quiet, not empty but content.